Have you ever heard the expression, full circle? Well, as you know, I love journeys, and my journey took a full circle on November 2nd. I was delivering a keynote, Marble Slab Creamery, and it took me back to the day I turned 16 years old. I was 5'1". I was just thankfully had a final growth spurt. And I got a job at Seal Test Dairies in Montreal, and my job was to scoop ice cream. They had a little ice cream shop off their dairy. And every night there'd be a lineup, and if it was a sunny night, it'd be a lineup around the block. And I remember that summer, I grew my first bicep, but it was only in one arm, the arm I scooped ice cream with. And I just realized that how much I enjoyed having people come in and the whole excitement of serving them and having them taste it for the first time and share a taste with somebody else. And I just realized that was just magical. And so then when I had a chance to come out and speak at this event, I realized I might have served 200 people that summer, but I was going to interview someone that served thousands through his organization. He's an entrepreneur, and I often talk about entrepreneurs' journeys because they're not, Hollywood romance is about how wonderful it is to be an entrepreneur, but along the way, there's a lot of speed bumps and occasional sledgehammers. So today, I'm very honored to introduce you to Cam Inglis, who's the founder of Marble Slab Creamery in Canada. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
We talk about journeys, and I was interested when I started researching yours after you agreed to do the podcast. Diane Buckner, who's the host of Dragon's Den, good friend of mine, wrote an article about you. I think it was in 2011. You almost screamed out of the newspaper saying, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Before I get to that, because I think there's a bit of a lie there, because the other article I read about you was your original aspirations wasn't so much to be an entrepreneur, but a professional hockey player.
That's correct. That is true.
What did you trade the hockey bag for deciding you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Well, it's interesting because now with the benefit of hindsight, I thought I wanted to be a hockey player. And so basically I went down the same road many do, where you get the scouts weren't calling, the NHL wasn't calling. It became obvious that I just wasn't going to be good enough at hockey. But the reason why I say with the benefit of hindsight, it's kind of funny because I have some friends that played professional and that just recently retired. And I would have been the worst professional hockey player or athlete at all because the organization that you play for completely owns you. And they tell you exactly what to do and when to do and how to do it. And you have no freedom and you have no time of your own. I mean, if they pay you millions of dollars to play hockey or do whatever, it's basically all theirs. And so it's funny how now as an entrepreneur, probably most of the franchisees here, no one likes to listen to much. They want to do their own thing and keep going and changing and doing your own thing. So the entrepreneurial path is quite a bit different than the sports path.
But the first step on that journey, though, which I always thought was a little of an anomaly, is you went to accounting school.
When I came to the realization as a 20-year-old playing junior hockey that the NHL wasn't as close as I thought, I phoned my dad and said, hey, I think I better go back to university, which of course, first I had to upgrade to get to university, but this is a different story. And my dad said, okay, well, I'll find something for you. And of course, newspapers were still the thing. So I came back at Christmas break for that season. I was playing in Quesnel, which is in northern BC. He had highlighted all of the different jobs that were in the newspaper, and they were mostly accounting. And he said, you should go back to university and you should go in accounting. And I thought, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And what do accountants do? And he's like, well, they can make lots of money and they can do this, that. And so I packed in hockey and I came back and I upgraded for a semester and then got into Mount Royal College, started doing accounting. And I did a couple of years and I remember thinking, man, this is gonna suck. If this is what I have to do every day, this accounting, it's so boring. And I joke now with my friends that are in it, there's only one way to do accounting. So I kept thinking, well, but then what? So I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be an accountant and I didn't really know how to get out of that because I had put 2 years into it. And then I transferred over to U of C because I finally got my grades high enough. And I switched into economics and finance, which I obviously now learn are much more thinking degrees as opposed to mundane routine.
So when Diane Buckner and you said, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, that seems to be that really started to be your North Star when you got out of university and you found yourself in the real estate business.
My partner, one of my co-founders with Marble Slab, had a real estate business in commercial development. And so I worked for him while I was in university. And when I got done university, he and his partner had a little bit of a dispute, and they were going to end their real estate business. And so I stumbled into the housing business, selling houses. I had another introduction made to me to a company, a big home builder in Calgary called Homes by Avi.
You know, you talk about location. If I remember that job, from what I understand, they gave you what we often call a dog with fleas. I mean, they weren't actually assigning you into an area that had a lot of robust demand, but you turned that around. How did you do that?
I didn't know at the time that he hired me to sell houses in the community was called Lake Chaparral, which is at that time was the furthest community south in Calgary. It was on the other side of what's called 22X, which is now the Ring Road. And there was only one dirt road going down into Lake Chaparral. And Avi, he pitched me really well. I said, well, how much can I make? And he says, you can make as much as you want. And I thought, wow. He's like, no cap. I thought, wow. Okay. So, most of my friends were making $10 an hour and I could make as much money as I wanted. And what he didn't tell me is that the two salespeople before me, they hadn't sold a house in Lake Chaparral in 14 months. And it was so far out of the city at the time, and there was no infrastructure that no one wanted to be out there. I got out there and all I could see was this brand new show home, and I couldn't believe how nice a new home was. And the only home that I really knew was sort of my parents' house and a couple of the billets that I lived in over the years playing hockey. And I thought, wow, if anyone ever saw this, they would definitely want to own one of these things. And, that turned out to be probably one of the most pivotal moments for me looking back, in that the lens that you look through is so important. So that first year, I sold 44 houses in Lake Chaparral. And then I won Rookie of the Year in Canada for new home sales.
It reminds me of the story of the Bata shoes, which was a Canadian company, immigrant from Czechoslovakia. Their shoes were so popular in Africa, they're called Batas. And yet when he first went to look at that market, they sent two people down. One took the north part of Africa, one took the south. And one person came back and said, there's no market here. Nobody wears shoes. And Bata came back and said, I've never seen a bigger opportunity. No one wears shoes. And so it's a great lesson in life, is the sense of the lens that you look at the world. What was the next move on the chessboard for you? Because you certainly, a lot of entrepreneurs is the fact that there's no upside, but with that comes risk, because there's no necessarily a guarantee, especially if you're in a commission only world. So where'd you move the pieces next?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So Avi, who was himself obviously a great entrepreneur, he told me there was no upper limit to my earnings. And of course, I didn't understand at that time that meant that there was no salary either. Fresh out of university, I remember I had a line of credit that had no balance, and it was a $5,000 limit. And so I remember thinking, okay, well, my burn rate at that time, living with 3 or 4 roommates, was maybe like $600 a month. So I thought, well, I've got about 6 months of living here on my line of credit. I realized quickly, I better start selling houses. I better start moving houses here. And so I did right away. And then Avi he failed to tell me about part 2 of that, which also was you never got paid until the house started construction. And then you only got half. So that you got half when it started, and then you got half when it finished. It was his way of making sure that you stayed with the customer right through the process. What I started to realize quickly was that there was enormous potential in creating and building long-term relationships with customers. In that community, I ended up selling houses again to people because it had multiple markets. It had sort of an entry level, and it had move up, and it had estate on the lake and that kind of stuff. And so that sort of got me thinking about, well, what could I do that was sort of bigger than this? And I'd always stayed in touch with Bernie, who was my mentor at the real estate company, and we went on a trip one day and to Phoenix, where he was building a hotel, and a broker took us to a ice cream shop, and he said, "You guys should see how they make this ice cream." And it was mixing it up on the slab, and we were totally enamored with how the style and the format of the slab. And we were flying back, and Bernie says, "Cam, like, maybe you should look into that." Like, I didn't even really know what that meant. Like, what, look into what? You could write a business plan. And so I joke with people now. I said, like, the only really tangible thing you learn coming out of business school prior to working is how to write a business plan. So I wrote a business plan, started off with, like, what was the business? Where could the business go? Who are the customers? Who are the competitors? Where, and as I was writing the business plan, it was there was a bit of an aha moment where I was like, wow, there doesn't appear to be anybody in this category. I mean, there's lots of people in the ice cream category, but we kind of had Dairy Queen, Baskin Robbins, and then independents. Those were kind of our three groups. And then we said, but who's on the top? Like, who's the premium provider? And it sort of became obvious that the answer, there was nobody. There was nobody at the very top of the class. It was right when Starbucks was really hitting, and you could get people wanting drinks, this many pumps, this amount of sugar, the extra hot.
The whole personalization move.
Yeah, the customization. And so at the time, we really thought, like, wow, this is this is the Starbucks of ice cream. You can get it however you want it, whichever way you want it. You can get it custom to yourself every time, anytime. Our eyes got big. We saw a big opportunity.
So how'd you convince the Marble Slab in the States to surrender north of the 49s to you and Bernie? Was it just a check, or did they see something in you? Or, because that's a big leap of faith for them.
We just phoned them. And at that time they were based in Texas, and the guy's name was Chris Dull, who was the development guy. And we just said, hey, this is who we are. We're from Canada. Wonder if you guys have ever thought about selling ice cream in Canada. Good Texas boys, like, yo, y'all are from Canada? He just said, we haven't really thought about it, but y'all want to meet? So we had this really initially strong relationship, like right out of the gates. We just had clicked. So we got all excited, and then we kind of got nervous. We thought, oh, they seem too eager to want to come up here. We better go down there, make sure they've got an office and they've got people, and there's like activity going on. And so anyways, we flew down to Houston, and we met with the owner's name was Ronnie Handkammer, and we just chatted about it. We just said, hey, like, this is what we see. Here's the opportunity. This is what we think the market could hold. And you could see the relationship was good. Like, we had common beliefs in sort of the partnership and how we got to work together on this. We're charting new territory, and it took about a year to kind of get the deal done.
Any time during that year that you just wanted to say, this is a lot of work, I just want to get back to doing real estate?
No, in fact, on the encouragement of both Bernie and my employer, Avi, I kept selling houses, and the show homes used to be closed on Fridays. So Thursday night, Bernie and I would fly to either Phoenix or Texas, Houston, because they had kind of two different offices, and we would meet with these guys monthly, and then I would fly back on Saturday mornings. I would land and drive straight from the airport to the show home. I worked the whole time right up until we inked the deal.
So 20 years ago, we cut the cake last night, and saw today, this morning, you're presenting the growth and such. What did you learn about yourself going from thinking about the desired outcome, the gauntlet of running that year, getting the deal done, to making that first store open?
The first thing was I didn't really understand then how much financial sacrifice was required to get going. I quickly was tuned in by Bernie on that one, because my salary for the first year was $36,000, which was down from a much larger number selling houses. Yeah. In year two, it could be bumped up to $42,000. I was thinking, holy cow. And then he said, and then it would have to hold there for another year. My combined income for 3 years was like half of what I had been making. And so I was sort of thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have to really be diligent here. And I better not screw this up. You know, when I hear new stores open up and franchisees about how tight it is, like I know how tight it is. You can't really learn that. You have to just go through it.
So you get the thing going, and you got some interesting things I'm already learning about you in the knapsack. I mean, you're chasing what was important to you versus what wasn't, even though accounting provided you security, willing to risk and reward, going in there and understanding you got to tighten your belt. You get this thing moving. I'm going to fast forward the story a bit. And just as it's starting to create some momentum, a pretty big competitor called Tim Hortons hits you with a pretty hard sledgehammer.
That was a challenge. Cold Stone, made an announcement that they were partnering with Tim Hortons. And, obviously Tim Hortons, pretty powerful brand. Cold Stone, pretty powerful brand in some parts of the US. They made it well known that they were coming after me. And in fact, they opened 3 co-branded stores literally in one night. They went in, put signs up, they put 3 stores all around the corporate office. And so it was pretty obvious that they were coming for us, both figuratively and literally. And so we obviously had tremendous fear in the system, and there was lots of panic, and there was many franchisees that felt like this was it and we were going to go down. I'm kind of by nature a fighter. I don't go looking for fights, but if you want to fight me, then, we can go. And so that's how I kind of put my helmet on for Tim Hortons. I thought, okay, no problem, guys. I mean, I sat up for nights and nights and nights. And then it kind of came to me that what we had to do was get the franchisees together, get on a call, and we had to make a list of all the things that they could do and we could do. And some of our older franchisees probably remember these calls. We were just spitballing, like, let's just get it all out. And, it was like, they got more money. Yeah, they got more money. They got more stores. They got more stores. They have more marketing people. Yeah, they have more marketing people. They do TV. They do, and we just rattled off this list. It was so long. There was pages and pages of stuff that we wrote about Tim Hortons and all the different ways that they could just totally annihilate us. Well, let's look at ours. What do we have? Right away, someone's like, well, our ice cream is better. That's a good one. Let's start with that one. Our ice cream tastes better. Well, we can make decisions quicker. We could get flavors out. And so all of a sudden we realized that, you don't have to shoulder tackle an 800-pound gorilla. You do need to take him to the ground, but you got to clip him at the toe and then at the ankle and then the knee. And then you got to push him over. Not a fighter.
You're pretty knowledgeable on how to take down an 800-pound gorilla.
And it was, then all of a sudden the problem wasn't as scary as it looked. And the job was very clear to everyone that participated in the exercise that the only thing we could control was what we did. They could outspend us. They could outmarket us. They could out everything. But what they couldn't do is they couldn't control what we were going to do. So if we wanted to launch a flavor, we could get a new flavor out, a couple of weeks. We wanted to change, the offerings, we could do it quickly. There was no processes, we had a call and then it was really where we started to realize that we could do a way better job in the cake business. We could do more cakes. We could do them faster. We could customize them. They didn't have half liters. They didn't have, crumbles. They didn't have ice cream sandwiches. We had all these things. And so what we decided was we had to stay laser focused on just us. It worked. I mean, they went ahead and they put in 120 or 25 stores almost overnight. I mean, within about 2 or 3 years, they had more than doubled what we were at the time, maybe tripled.
And what happened to them?
What ended up happening was what we had projected and focused on was they had terrible service. They were slow. I think there's maybe 4 left in total. And they wrote down, Tim Hortons ended up writing down, it was about 150 million and shut them all down. There's a couple guys that hung on to them. There's one in Banff and there's a couple in Toronto, but they shut them all down. Some of the things that we knew we were going to be better at, primarily in execution, was exactly what happened.
So the next big one that comes at you, you finally take that 800-pound gorilla and wrestle it to the ground. But now all of a sudden there's about 5,000 mosquitoes coming at you. I'd say let's killer bees in the form of yogurt. Yeah. I mean, this wasn't just one competitor now. It's coming at you from every side. I remember growing up playing the board game Risk. You had to choose between a small territory that you could defend or a big territory. You got more reward for it. But if any part of your board had collapsed, you failed with that strategy. To me, you're kind of playing Risks all of a sudden. How fast did that happen? And what did you do to counter that one?
So first I would say, well, it was almost faster. It was crazy how many stores got opened in all the brands. I mean, there were so many. I can't even, you couldn't keep up. Pinkberry, Red Mango, Tutti Frutti, Menchie's. There were so many brands and they were opening so fast. The difference was anyone who had already been through the Cold Stone thing, they didn't even blink. It was only people that hadn't gone through Cold Stone that got panicked. The messaging was the same. It was like, okay, guys, here's the deal. They are going to take customer transactions for a period of time. We are going to have to address this. And we can't just do nothing. And one of the best things that actually ever came out of that whole experiment with self-serve yogurt was it forced us to introduce introduce unlimited mix-ins and revamp our pricing offering. We kind of knew it, but we didn't want to admit it. But we had a pricing transparency problem where we would have a price on the board, but it only included one topping, but all the marketing materials showed 3 or 4 toppings. And then you'd get to the till and customer would I used to see this all the time. The customer would hold their ice cream cone looking at the menu, thinking it was like $5. And then the till, the checkout person was asking them for $7 because we'd charged them for extra mix-ins. And then we'd upgraded a cone that no one knew there was a price for. And the sales force in the slab on the store were selling, but the customer had no idea that they were being charged for all this. We realized that how we were going to regain customer transactions was reduce our ladles, our like the amount of mix-ins, make it all inclusive, make one price, put the price up there. The strategy of mix-ins came from franchisees. It was probably the most transformative thing for Marble Slab was for us to combat that. It made us introduce unlimited mix-ins. And I remember talking to Rick in London, and inside of a year, he had 18 yogurt shops in London. At that time, London was like 350,000 people. We had 3 great stores out there. I'm thinking, was the world this short on, frozen dessert? But it happened that quickly. And so the other side of me was like, wow, like there's more customers out there than we think there are.
Mm-hmm. And then, you talked about another time, another sledgehammer. It was one that none of us asked for or wanted, which was the pandemic. And that forced you once again to innovate. So it's an interesting pattern. In that case, your app, your website. Do you think that's a consistent chord with entrepreneurs, that they're always looking for unmet needs, but when their back is against the wall is when they become the most ferocious, because it is a matter of survival of the fittest, or the fastest, as you said, or the more creative?
Yeah, I would say for sure. I mean, I would say everyone, including myself, was completely terrified when COVID hit. And I remember our office went from 16 or 18 down to 5. My partner, Bernie, the accountant, he says, look, if you're waiting around for a solution from the government, he's like, you'll be broke by the time they come up with one. He's like, so put everyone on a layoff until further notice.
How tough was that on you?
Oh, it was unbelievable. I remember it was just sitting in the boardroom and, laid off 12 people in a row. It was brutal. I actually still remember Britt. Britt thought she was getting laid off. And at the time, Britt was our marketing coordinator. And she said, okay, I know you're going to lay me off. I said, no, actually, I'm here to tell you that I'm not laying you off because I don't even know how to log into our Facebook account. And I said, so congratulations, it's going to be you and me in marketing now.
So Britt, never give away the password. When we return, my 3 takeaways, and then we talk about why retail matters. It's Tony Chapman from Chatter That Matters. I asked Canadians about their money matters. We talked debt, inflation, interest rates, and many were worried, and some felt they could lose everything. In response, RBC has created My Money Matters. It's a site where you gain financial knowledge, you learn how to manage debt, reduce stress. There's even tools and apps to help you deal with the realities of today. Visit rbc.com/money matters. Your financial well-being matters to you and to RBC.
You're listening to Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
My guest today is Cam Inglis. We taped this interview in front of a live audience. Cam is a fantastic human being, a talented entrepreneur. He owns the Marble Slab Creamery brand in Canada. And if you haven't tried their ice cream, you should. I want to now move the conversation because I was talking about my experiences delivering keynotes and actually when I was in the advertising business, working very closely with franchise organizations. And I want to have an honest conversation with you because when I've talked to the CEOs, it can be very lonely at the top because you've got to be the optimist. You got to be the person that's talking about projecting growth. You got to talk about all the possibilities. But at the same time, there's often cement that pours onto the culture when it comes to tension points that can sometimes flare up. You mentioned a store that that very successful store that you had to protect the interest of 100 other franchisees in your brand. What do you need to do to improve as an organization so you're doing what I said, one for all, and realizing the battle's external versus internal?
Communication is always the best and worst part. But when it's going right and the messages are understood, like I think back to that COVID thing and, the website and the app were franchisee funded. We crafted up this material and this email and we'd thought about it and we'd priced it out 20 times and it was right in the middle of COVID and everyone is terrified and we hold a call and an email and we say, look, guys, here's what we think. We do the website. This is what it's going to cost. Here's what we think the benefits are. And everybody was a yes. We had done, with a very small team, a really good job communicating the need, the how, the why. And in the midst of COVID, when everybody was panicking. And not only that, we were also saying hey, by the way, we need some money to do this. And, everyone, including myself, is trying to cut back, but now it's like, we got to invest. And so that was huge. And same with the app that we came back to everyone, a year later, still in COVID. And we're like, oh, hey guys, this is what we got to do. And so when the message is sent properly, explained, it's very powerful for alignment because the head office can't win and franchisees lose, and the franchisees can't win and head office lose. It has to be win-win.
That can be explained by math. You can look at the numbers, but emotionally, when I've been around organizations, when I hear seeds of discontent, it is one or the other has an unfair advantage or is winning more than the other. How do you bring transparency into an organization that says Because it's easy to say to the podium when you win, I win, or we all win together. I mean, that's great rhetoric. How do you turn that into reality so that the vast majority of your organization says we're part of a team building a great cathedral versus you're making it impossible for me to compete?
Yeah, I've always found that the facts, presenting the facts, like you say, show the math, like, and then backing that up, like showing people, I mean, this is what the issue is, whether it's a sales initiative or a promotion or a SKU that we're going to warehouse. I find that most often when you are honest with people and you share the information and it's fair, they're generally on board with it. And when they're not, it's usually that we haven't provided enough or we haven't dug deep enough to what it is they're really asking for or what information's missing. Because the reality is that I tell this to this group and to new people coming in is that this is a for-profit exercise. Like you have to make money. Like this is a business. They got to make money. We got to make money. Everyone has to make money. And so what is the fairest way that we can all be profitable? Our warehouse initiative too. Again, some of our franchisees have been with us a long time. It's hard to believe how we used to operate pre-distribution. We used to have, people complain about freight. We used to have franchisees on their own send like 6 pails of cheesecake mix to their store from the middle of the United States with freight, with exchange, with cross-border, you think you're buying a pail of cheesecake for $100. It cost you $3 when it got to the store. And we thought that was the best way of doing business back then.
There's an incredible book called The Founder's Dilemma, which is when is it time for the founder to step aside? Because either the business has become more complicated, but more often than not, they've lost their passion. What keeps you so passionate about this business? And I always look at 3 wealth. There's intellectual wealth, there's emotional wealth, and there's financial wealth.
Well, I think the innovation is what, just how much better the offering is today. And when I say offering, like in the store, like a customer, what they can buy from us, the range of offerings that, like, whether it's the takeout items, the vastness of our flavors, but just the outside the store, the whole system itself, ordering from us, online ordering from us, like all of the different vehicles to transact with Marble Slab. There's so many more things. They're so well understood. We talk about yogurt. They're like, they did ultimately get 400 plus stores in the country. And so it tells you there are way more customers to get out there. And we have a really good system from, online training to the store opening processes to audits, ordering, the business is hard, but all businesses are hard. People that are experienced and they've been in business before, if they got dropped into our system and got told, like, give us an evaluation of this, I'm certain everyone would say it's excellent. I don't think we knew that before. 2 more questions for you. The first, if you could wave a magic wand and get the people in this audience to do one thing superbly over and over again, what would you wish for? Well, operational execution for sure. It's 100%. Like, we constantly hear people always want to say they need more marketing. Every time we do a deep dive on our top performing stores, the findings are they execute perfectly operationally. So from clean floors, clean windows, fully stocked displays, flavor variety, cones, like everything operationally. And in fact, when new franchisees come to town and we say, oh, go to this store, go to that store, you won't believe the volume or wherever they're from. They actually call me and they're like, I went down to Cross Iron or Masonville, and they're almost disappointed. Like, they think they were going to see a clown in the front jumping up and down and, a big parade going on. And no, but did you notice their cake display? Did you notice, how many cones they had? Did you notice how many flavors they offer? Did you notice if the staff all wore uniforms? Did you know? So the short answer is I would make everyone an excellent operational.
And my last question for you is, what would you change about yourself? Or would you change anything about yourself?
I mean, I could stand to be a little bit more compassionate. I could be slightly more flexible, but not too much.
I always end my podcast with my 3 takeaways because I always want to put something in my knapsack. The first one I'd say about you is you're a lot softer than you think you are. And I'll tell you why. When I toured your warehouse and you were showing me the dry training that you set up for your son so that he could come in and you had a hockey net in there. Or this morning when you walked in and you had the biggest smile because your nanny had abandoned you, happened to be the same week that you're doing the franchisee, but you got to take your kids to school. I just think it's important that we all remember that the human in humanity guides us much more than what accounting would have said the bottom line. The second thing is just how important fear is. We can either succumb to it and get overpowered for it, but what makes, I think, all of us as entrepreneurs more resilient and more resourceful is we survive what seems to be insurmountable. And we don't just survive by kind of hanging on to a life raft. We reinvent new life rafts. And you've done that time and time again as an organization. You should be just very proud of that. And whoever reached into their pockets the second year of COVID shows to me that you believe in this business. And the third thing is that you're 20 years into your journey and you talk like it just began. It's almost like you've gone from the adolescence to your teenage years, and now you're graduating with this sense of conviction and confidence. And I have to believe in the next 10 years, you're going to achieve that desired outcome of doing what you did in the first 20 and then some. So for all of that and more, I appreciate you joining me in Chatter That Matters. I think it deserves a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you know, I'm taping this live. Marble Bhatthal is going to come up because I had a chance to talk to Mar and her mother. You two are a force of human nature. And how I learned that is I happened to be having quite an important discussion with Cam, and you burst into the office, and next thing I wasn't even in the office anymore. And I realized there was a very different relationship that was going on. So take me back to how you first met and got involved in this business and how it's impacted you personally.
One day, I was going up to her office to meet her for lunch, and she walked through a fight between 2 homeless men, and she basically got picked up and thrown against a wall. So she had a massive tear in her shoulder, and she had damage to her left arm, nerve damage. So she couldn't work. She was on WCB. You only make a couple $100. There's not much support there. So I was in grade 11, and she never had me working a part-time job because she wanted me to focus on school. I wanted to be an engineer.
And you're also, though, just the 2 of you is your nuclear home. There's no dad there. It's just the 2 of you.
Yeah, no dad, no siblings.
Yeah.
I'm an only child. She comes to me one day and she's like, you don't have a choice. You need to start working. You got to carry the household. So we have a family friend that owned a Jugo Juice at that point in Cross Iron Mills, one of the malls that we have one of our businesses in. So I started working at this Jugo Juice, and I'd work 5 days a week. I'd finish school at 3:30, get onto transit, and be at Cross Iron Mills for 3:30. From 3:30 to 10:30, I would put in an 8-hour shift. And very quickly, we realized that we're going to have to buy a business. So our family friend was basically said, he's like, look into Jugo Juice. It's a good brand. And at that point, I was 16 years old, and I'm managing this individual's Jugo Juice fully. He had more trust in me than he had in his own children. It was to the point where I'd be taking cash deposits home. We start looking for Jugo Juice opportunities, and how Jugo Juice works is it's on a bid system. So it's not like Marble Slab where you have a fixed cost, you're paying your fixed cost, and you open up your store, and that's what it is. Many franchise systems make you bid. So it could cost $300,000 to open a store, but you're bidding to enter that system. So we were outbid by about $25,000. It wasn't working out for us. So one day when I'm sitting at Cross Iron eating ice cream from Rocky Mountain, I'm like, what can we do? one of the things at Jugo Juice that I quickly learned is that people wanted milkshakes and there was no milkshakes. So we would call our smoothies milkshakes and sell them like that. And I'm having this ice cream and I look around and I'm like, this is horrible ice cream. It hits me. I'm like, we need a marble slab in here. A question that, many new franchisees ask, what happens in the winter? So my mom at that point, she's like, you know what, just fill out the application. We'll see what happens. We took it as a joke. The sales lady in development, her name was Lynn Track. So I fill out this little online form. She calls me 10 minutes later. Here's a candidate profile. Can you fill it out and send it back? 2 hours later, I'm sitting in front of Cam having an interview. This 16-year-old. I get through my interview. They provide the disclosure the next day. He gives Van, the vice president of leasing at that time, a call. And Van's like, yeah, I have a spot for you. It's in the middle of nowhere in the mall. So this all happened in a span of a week. My mother goes to the bank. She pulls out $25,000. We're going to go meet Lynn at the lawyer's office to execute the franchise agreement. She got cold feet. She didn't want to do it anymore. So she drives back to RBC with this bank draft and says, I want to cancel it. I want my money back. And this lady at RBC, even though a bank draft is reversible, she says, no, this is treated as cash. We can't reverse this. So unfortunately, you're stuck with it. She called the manager. She called the supervisor. For some reason, something in the universe that day did not let that draft get canceled. So he drove back another 10 minutes to this lawyer's office in the Northeast. We met Lynn there. We executed this, and even Cam at that time wasn't certain about the location. He wanted us to buy a location in another spot that we weren't certain about. And my mother at that point was very fearful. She's like, what did I just sign myself up for? I was fearful because I'm like, I'm the one that created this whole mess. And Cam is fearful because this mall is struggling at the time, and we got the worst possible spot in the mall.
And this is coming from a guy that went to sell houses where nobody wanted to buy houses.
Yeah. So everyone was just very scared. So fast forward about 9 months. We open on December 13th, and this store within 2 weeks starts outperforming the numbers at Chinook Center. That's in the worst end of the mall, but we were just very aggressive with how we opened our store with marketing, with different tactics. We were couponing. It's a funny thing to note that there was actually 2 stores in Chinook Center at that time. And 1 store was beating 2 stores with combined revenue. That's how powerful it was. So everyone's like, don't get too excited. It's the first year, it's the honeymoon phase. The second year was even better than the first year. And they're like, it's just luck. It'll go down the third year. The third year was even better than the first and the second year.
I talked about when I started hearing the rest of the story, which is even, in fact, I'm going to bring you actually back to be a guest in the podcast. I got a couple of quick questions. You studying to be an, engineer, your mom and stuff. How has it changed your relationship with you and your mom? Because how many stores do you have now?
We're at 5 stores.
And then you just bought into the corporate store too.
The corporate store, yeah. And we'll have a 6th one next year.
You're now 29.
29, yeah.
No longer this, the kid thing. Yeah. And what's your relationship like with Cam as well? Because I'm curious about how that factors into success.
My relationship with my mom has always been, she's my best friend. Someone on the marketing team many years ago at an AGM made a comment about me and my mother saying that we complement each other. Her weaknesses are my strengths, and her strengths are my weaknesses. And that's why things just work so well between us.
And what advice can you give to others? Because we often start that way in a relationship, including marriage. And then over time, the power can flow, who has got influence, who's got authority, egos can get in the way. How have you managed to keep that in that kind of relationship? I
think at the end of the day, it's understanding that you have to make things work, regardless of conflict, regardless of egos, regardless of whatever the situation is. You have to learn to remain calm to get past the storm. And I want to turn it to Cam because I thought it was really interesting when I pulled you from the meeting and just to talk a little bit about it, because the way you walked in the office, I thought was like, it's interesting how you described it. I mean, father figure, mentor, but at the same time, he's as tough as hell on me. Cam has completely changed my life around from being a 15-year-old that walked into his office to open up 1 store. My game plan was always to live in the glitz and glam of the oil and gas world. That's what you do in Calgary. In my 3rd year, when the economic climate in Alberta completely changed with the collapse of the global energy market, I was sitting in his office and he's like, what's your game plan? I'm like, my game plan is I'm going to go get an MBA as soon as I'm done. And then I'm going to climb up the corporate ladder, and cross iron mills will be my side hustle Friday, Saturday, Sundays. And he was almost offended with the comment that I made about the MBA, right? He's like, I'll teach you an MBA. And he's like, okay, what company do you want to work for? So I tell him the company that I want to work for, and he pulls up the junior engineer position and he's like, let me get this straight. You want to be locked into a 9 to 5, 5 days a week for 52 weeks out of the year with a possibility of 3 weeks of vacation time to make what you do in 1 quarter in 1 year and pay taxes? He basically gave me advice. He's like, if I was you, I would do this. He has kept me disciplined, motivated. He has seen things in me I haven't seen in myself.
Have you improved him?
I don't know, Cam. Have I?
But for those who can't listen, there was a very deep and somewhat uncomfortable laugh in the corner. You know, Amar, I just wanted to just thank you for coming up. And the reason I brought you up wasn't to endorse the franchise, but just to really talk about how journeys change along the way. And it's wonderful that you're in a position where you still have your best friend and your mom, that you're opening more stores and can be the kind of ambassador that I think this company wants for their brand. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Joining me now is Graeme Green. He's the Director of Franchise Markets at RBC. And Graeme and I have become good friends on LinkedIn. So I asked if he'd come on and join the show and talk more about his expertise, which is franchising. Graeme, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Tony, thanks for having me. This is a great honor.
It's long overdue, my friend. We do exchange a lot on LinkedIn, but it was reading one of your posts. I think you were over the holidays and you're down looking at great franchises in the States. First of all, that's not necessarily a holiday because it sounds like you're doing some work, but just curious, what makes for a great franchise?
I think what makes franchisors great and what their secret sauce is how they support their franchisees. They have support systems in place to make sure that they can see things far down the road if there's going to be some problems. They see opportunities for future growth and great communication skills.
On the other side, because I know you provide a lot of capital for people that want to get in to buy a franchise, what makes for a good franchisee? Like, what do you look for beyond the fact that they might have capital that you'd say, this is an individual that could really take that, you know, as you talk game book and score a lot of touchdowns with it?
There's someone that actually has to work with the playbook. They can't just go into a franchise and just say, I've got money, I'm going to put it in here and make it work for me and sit back and not do anything. I think the best franchisees that I've ever had to work with are the people that are willing to get their hands dirty. They're the ability to go in and work every position within the business that they're in for the franchise. And again, teamwork.
I often see when I'm actually delivering keynotes at conferences where there's franchisees in the audience, the best seem to own more than one. Is this what you see as a pattern, that once people really understand this playbook, then the idea then is they can expand their footprint? Or is that just a certain individual that wants to add both that complexity and opportunity to their lives?
I think I've been very fortunate over my years at RBC working in the franchise space to work with franchisees that own multiple locations. But what I can say is the ones that start with one, for the most part, they want more than one. They want two, and when they've got two, they want three. I think when I was talking to some franchisees at a very popular burger and fries franchise, they said the first two were absolute killer on them. They worked so hard to establish that. But once they hit the fourth location and got their teams set up, it became a lot easier for them to optimize their business and produce great results.
What do you like the most about your job?
What do I like most about my job besides the ability to go out and eat great food? It's just the people that I get to work with. Everyone's very dynamic. In the franchise space, people come from diverse backgrounds, their experiences that they have to save up the equity to get into the business. It's always fascinating to me. That's always the first question I ask people. is what did you do before this? Because for me, that's building the relationship. And to me, that's what this job's all about.
Well, Graeme Green, we were long overdue, and I'm going to be knocking on your door again because there's some fantastic insights. It was magical to have you on Chatter That Matters, Graeme. So let's do this again.
Thanks, Tony, for the great opportunity. Look forward to connecting with you again in the near future. See you on LinkedIn.
Chatter That Matters has been a presentation of RBC.
It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.